Hello, Yellowknife friends. As you know, today we're talking about Thomas and doubts, John chapter 20, verses 19 to 31, the story of the legendary doubting Thomas. This is just a few thoughts about doubt. So, last week on Easter Sunday, we talked a lot about space, and I was telling you about the spaceship called the Hail Mary, which traveled into deep space to save the sun from dimming, which was a fantastical story that was full of hope. And this week, it seems like we're living in that story in real life, watching all the videos from inside the Artemis 2 and seeing all the stunning images taken from outside of it. The kind of images that leave us breathless and humbled at what our world really looks like. A crescent Earth, or an Earthrise, or the moon hanging there just outside the window like it's close enough to touch, galaxies spilling across the screen. It's amazing. A few nights ago, I had the opportunity to see Artemis myself with a telescope. My partner Mike is an astronomer, some of you know, and he asked me if I'd like to help him focus this giant machine, which was how I happened to find myself in a farmer's field looking at a bunch of fuzzy dots on a black screen, which seemed kind of anticlimactic, to tell you the truth. And we had to wait until the next morning when the footage was in and edited to actually see the spaceship. And so he was showing me, see this tiny little star? And I would say, okay, like that one? He's like, no, like the one that's way smaller than that, like over here. And like, I don't even see a dot. Okay, no, that's the star. That one, the smaller one. Okay, keep your eyes fixed on that spot, he would say. And I would, okay, I'm looking, can barely see the star. And he's like, in a minute, you're going to see just a tiny little bit of movement, and that's the spaceship. And it took me 3 tries because I couldn't see anything at all with this tiny little images. But finally, on the 3rd try, I saw it looked nothing more like a speck of dust making a tiny little movement in front of a star that I could barely see. And I looked up doubtfully at Mike and I said, "Was that it?" And he was like, "Yes." He is positively bubbling over with excitement. "Isn't it amazing?" And I'm quietly thinking to myself, that's a spaceship. But it was, and it is amazing, of course. But I started to think that sometimes this impossibly tiny dot is actually how evidence works. More often than not, we have this idea, you see, that proof is going to feel big and clear and undeniable, like a spaceship actually shaped like a rocket ship on a telescope screen, especially in our age of cameras, which are everywhere on our dashboards and our phones, on our bodies sometimes even. And we think that once we see the footage or the image, the thing that proves it, there will be like fireworks and certainty because something is going to settle a debate for once and for all. But so much more often, the proof that we get, the evidence that we get that something amazing has happened, is actually just a tiny, faint little dot. It's something that's very easy to miss, and it's something that we could very easily dismiss. Many of you might relate to this if you ever looked at an ultrasound image when you were expecting a baby. For me, my pregnancy with Alex was very rough. We had a major genetic scare that led to a lot of doctors predicting that he wouldn't actually even survive to be born. If he did, it was going to be with serious problems. And it took about 7 months, 28 weeks, until we were given a definitive, oh, like he's fine, actually. And 28 weeks is a lot of weeks to spend worrying. For those 7 months, it was like I lived and died by every ultrasound. And every time I was told, oh, well, things are maybe looking okay, I would feel this initial wave of relief, but it never lasted. Okay, sure, things were okay yesterday, but today, tomorrow could be totally different. I was sure, always sure that if I saw just one more image of his heart beating or his toes wiggling, that I could finally trust and start shopping for baby clothes. But that silver bullet ultrasound image never came. And it seemed like if I was going to believe in this baby, I was going to have to take a very big leap of faith. We place a lot of weight on proof. We think If I could just see it, I would believe it, which is what Thomas says, right? Unless I see, unless I touch, I will not believe. And we tend to treat Thomas like he's some kind of problem. He gets a very bad rap, poor doubting Thomas. But it's funny, Thomas has actually already seen some pretty incredible things during the 3 years that he has spent as one of Jesus' disciples. He was there just a few weeks back when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. He lives in a world where stories of resurrection and divine figures, children of God, these things weren't actually all that unusual. These are well established tropes in the world of Greco Roman culture and storytelling. And so maybe the hardest thing, I think, for Thomas to believe wasn't that resurrection could happen. I think maybe the hardest thing to believe was that hope can be trusted, that something good might still happen, that after everything falls apart, after all the loss and grief and fear that surrounds Good Friday and surrounds all of the events that have just happened, that after all of that, there could still be something alive and good to hang on to. And that's actually way harder than accepting resurrection, isn't it? Because we've all lived through Good Fridays. In each of our lives, there have been times when everything has collapsed around us, when we have no idea how it is ever going to be okay ever again. Times that we have lost in the way that Thomas and the disciples had lost. Loss is part of being human. Maybe for you, it was a pregnancy, or maybe a relationship, or a job, or maybe your good health. Maybe you're dealing with disability where once you were you assumed ability, or maybe a loved one has died, or maybe you've lost your faith in the church or God, or lost faith in a friendship. We have all felt like Thomas, losing our faith, full of doubt, certain that nothing will ever be okay again. And when we feel like that, we are very reluctant to trust any good news that anyone tells us. We have been burned by hope before, we think. We are not going to be burned again. And so even when good news is offered, even when the best possible news is offered to us, we have seen the risen Lord. What could be better than that? It's not so much that we can't believe it's happened. It's that we don't think we can trust what it might mean. So think again about Artemis 2. The amazing thing that happened in the last 2 weeks isn't just that we went to the moon. That is amazing. Of course it's amazing. And also we did it 50 years ago several times. The amazing thing about this week, watching a spaceship in the sky, is that people all over the world have been united by good news. Can you imagine a hopeful story, news that you can't get enough of, in a world that feels so overwhelmingly awful and fractured, in a world of doom scrolling and terrible headlines and all of the things that worry us day in and day out? In this world, a team of people have come together to create something whose entire mission is that of possibility. This mission has shown us who we are from a distance. It says to us, we are not done exploring yet. We still have so much to learn. There is still so much that we could accomplish together, which, if you think about it, is the same kind of hope that is offered to us in blurry ultrasound images. It's the same kind of hope that shows up in tiny dots in telescopes. And it's the same type of hope that appears in locked rooms. It's faint and easy to miss, but oh, how powerful it is if we could just trust it. Because that's what happens in the gospel story. Jesus appears to his friends, and there isn't really a grand entrance. He just shows up in the same apartment, which was the place where they last had supper together. And he stands among them in the same way that he had stood among them so many times before. And the first thing that he does is breathe, which, if you think about it, is the exact opposite of the type of proof that Thomas is looking for. You can't see breath. You can't hold on to it. You can't even prove that it's there. And yet, It all begins with breath. Breath is everything. It's life. In Hebrew, the word is ruach, which means breath, spirit, and wind all at the same time. Jesus breathes on his friends. He says, "Peace be with you." He gives them his spirit. And that is the moment when something changes. Peace be with you. And only then, only after that happens, is Thomas able to approach his friend, finally, and begin to trust. Thomas can't place his wounds in the hands and feet of Christ until he accepts that peace, that breath. Something unseen happens first, before all the other stuff. We think of the story of Thomas as the story of the real bodily evidence, but it begins with something that you can't see at all. And that breath is the moment when doubt becomes trust and when faith becomes a possibility, when it becomes real. Because that's what faith is, actually. It's the willingness to notice and to hang on to those moments that are pregnant with possibility and think, this could be something, this right here. The possibility that good news could be true. And that's the willingness to let hope back into the picture, even after everything has fallen apart. Because as we learn, God will never abandon us to the Good Fridays of our lives. And especially in the days of our lives when hope seems hardest to grasp, those are the days when God meets us and breathes on us and says, "Peace be with you. Receive my spirit. Receive my breath." So in the next few minutes, we're going to do something silly. We're going to blow bubbles, which might seem like a foolish way to celebrate resurrection, but stay with me for a second. Because every time you blow a bubble, your breath, your spirit, your ruach, fills that bubble. Your spirit is carried in the air, and you can actually see it just for a second. It's so ephemeral. You can see the bubble, but you can't actually see the breath inside of it. This is evidence of your spirit, but it's fleeting and it could pop at any time. So you can't place too much confidence on the thing that you can see, because bubbles don't last. But when the bubbles pop, that breath, it doesn't disappear. It's still there. It's still in the room. It's still moving around. It's still part of our space. It's still part of our energy, our atmosphere. It is still creating something. It is still working itself out. It is still full of possibility, even when it doesn't have the shell to contain it. Hope is like this. The presence of the risen Christ is like this. It is okay to doubt. It is always okay to doubt. And it's not always easy to spot the activity of the divine in our lives. Resurrection isn't easy to prove. We are Christians. We know this. But it's still here. God is still here, moving around us, moving among us, shaping the world. And just as Thomas gets to experience Jesus appearing to him and giving him back hope, God calls us to trust the good news of resurrection. Hope has not vanished from our world. It never has. It never will. And even in those times when hope seems dim or blurry or faint or nothing at all, it is there, even if we can't see it. Scripture defines faith as the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. So let's take a moment to enjoy seeing the thing that we usually can't quite see, and trust that when it pops, what's unseen might matter more than we think. Friends, let's forever blow bubbles. Amen.